It's cold, it's deathly cold. The snow burns my body nastily and stickily. 1,000 needles pierce her almost bare feet. But what does it matter, when she has just been washed in public in a terrible stinking slurry called betrayal? It's hard to live after that. Mary was the kind of Turgenev girl who probably isn't around anymore. Well, tell me, who today reads Shakespeare or admires the short stories of Zweig? Not of this world. The classmates giggled. Mary blushed, lowered her head, and tried to slip out the door. More than anything, she wanted to be inconspicuous. And if she'd been born a chameleon, she'd probably have worn nothing but gray, like dried tree limbs. But unfortunately, Mary was 6 feet tall and had bright red and not dyed hair. That was why she always stood first in gym class at school. And she was the most visible girl in the school. Your daddy, Dan him, did his best. Sometimes my mom would say in her heart. But Daddy was a mythical creature. Never in her life. One day, she asked her mother if she loved him. What did she love? Her mother habitually took a drag. With a lipstick-painted bullhorn. He was building a couch here. I don't even know his last name. Mary wrinkled her nose, but knew she wasn't going to do much good. Better to climb behind a partition, open a treasured volume of Shakespeare, and immerse herself in dreams. Of course, she dreamed of Romeo, gentle, lofty, passionate, and somehow blue-eyed. Yeah, and next to you, bony, with the beginnings of breasts. She told herself off, but it still made her dream so sweet. Graduating high school, Mary got into a metropolitan university with surprising ease. There were a lot of guys in the group, so love flared like a twig. Listen, Mary, one day Olivia, her dorm mate, called her up for a chat. Anyway, Lily would have her Jack over on even-numbered days. I'll have my Charlie on the odd days, and you'll sit in the hallway during that time. Okay, Mary agreed easily. I'll read my notes in the hallway. That's fine, Olivia sang, turning so that she could see her beautiful figure in the mirror. We'll get you a boyfriend too, if you need one. And so it went. The boys regularly attacked the room, or rather their old creaky beds. Mary sat in the hallway, reading her outline, and everyone was pleased. By winter, the frenzy of lovemaking had subsided somewhat, and Lily and Olivia were melancholy. It would have been nice to have someone to worry about with their wistful faces. Mary had once failed. Did you really think they were serious about you? Were you jealous? Lily squinted. Okay, Olivia and I got dumped, so we'll find others tomorrow. But you'll stay the same. You were gray, and you're not. The girls looked at each other meaningfully and got quiet. If only Mary had known how fateful her words had been that night. David had always been the Casanova of the class. I'll bet he was. A capital girl. Suave, fun-loving, not a guy, but every girl's dream. But David was in no hurry to make a choice. He kept looking around and smiling his famous Cheshire cat smile. Mary had noticed David long ago, especially his blue eyes. They were just like Romeo's in her dreams. But David himself was obviously not trustworthy. Nor would he pay attention to someone like Mary. That's why she was astonished when he first sat down with her. Mary, can I have your notes? He smelled of expensive perfume and generally radiated health and a kind of radiant joy. I will, Mary muttered. And she thought to herself, why shouldn't such a little hog be happy? He didn't have a daddy or a mommy running around the dorms. Why so rude? David wondered. Still with a smile, looking at her, Mademoiselle smiled. She walked home in confusion. Do I really need him? He'll play and then he'll leave me. And me. But David looked tenderly into bed and took her for walks in the park. Why would you want to do that? Asked Mary one day, accustomed to always dotting the i's. You're interesting. We can talk about anything. David exhaled. And the girls in the class are stupid. And you're pretty too. He stopped and, breathing intermittently, put his arms around her. You're like a prostitute in the wind. Go warm, or you'll freeze to death. What are you afraid of? Now he is going to kiss me. Terrified, Mary thought, like a prince to a sleeping princess. And I will wake up, and it will be a disaster. Breaking out of the sweet captivity, she pushed him. I do not believe you. You will play and leave. I'll prove I'm not. David shouted after her. You'll see. From that day on, David literally became her shadow. He followed Mary on her heels, trying to guess her every wish, sometimes just sitting silently by her side. But even in that silence, there was something stirring. Was he really in love with me? Confused, Mary thought. No, it was too good to be true. More than anything, she wanted to believe David. But how she feared he would hurt her. She tested him for another month, not even letting him touch her. She took him to boring lectures and even the Philharmonic. But he dutifully tolerated everything and hated herself for her suspiciousness. One night, Olivia and Lily said they were going to a night disco. We'll be back by morning, Lily winked. And you're the hostess. The girls took off, leaving behind a trail of heavy perfume. And about 20 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. David. Mary's heart ached. How did he know I was alone? He looked at her tenderly with his blue eyes and cautiously crouched on the edge of the bed. I won't. Mary said tunefully. I won't chase him away. And then what happened happened. David, slowly, as if asking permission, one by one unbuttoned the buttons of her robe, and then, lowering his head, and then looking into her eyes. I love you, she whispered to David, before she drifted off into a shroud of sweet oblivion. And then all hell broke loose. Happy baptism of fire, my friend. Olivia sneeringly chanted in her ear. What's the matter with you, Olivia? Mary's eyes darkened, and red circles swirled as if in slow motion. She saw the smirking faces of her classmates at the open door, and David's triumphant grin. David was good. He knows what he's doing. Naturally, Lily spoke her words slowly. Here you go. Honest winnings. The crumpled $100 bill slowly moved to the bed, and David just as unnaturally slowly took it. And then all sound seemed to disappear. It was cold. How deathly cold it was. She ran outside in nothing but a robe thrown over her naked body. There was still a hurtful laugh in her ears. One slipper was lost, but she didn't care where she ran or how she looked. Snowflakes were sticking needles into her body. Her feet, frozen from the snow, no longer felt any pain. The light. What blinding light. It's good. It's warm. It's safe. We must run to it. Shock. Bright flash and darkness. The doctors said it could have been worse. If a man hadn't brought her to the hospital in time, she would have jumped under the wheels of his car like the devil out of a snuff box. But she had a couple of fractures, a concussion, and minor frostbite. They promised she'd be as good as new in a month. But if the fractures could be repaired, how could the soul be healed? Leaning on crutches and standing at the hospital window, Mary quietly pondered how to live her life. A month later, Mary was discharged from the hospital. Standing on the porch, she breathed in the damp, already spring air, exposing her face to the faint sunshine. Strangely enough, she wanted to live again. Mary. She shuddered at the sound of that voice and closed her eyes, wishing that David would just disappear at that moment, vanish as if he hadn't existed. How could she love that smug turkey? Mary, he said again, I'm sorry, okay. I'm not angry with you, she replied, weighed down by this conversation. Not angry? He rejoiced. Really? Then maybe you can sign that you have no claims against me for what happened. Otherwise, I'm getting expelled from the university. He shoved a piece of paper in her hands and looked pleadingly into her face with his disgusting blue eyes. Okay, Lev. She took off her mitten and signed it squeamishly. Now get out. 20 years later. The morning, as always, began at 6 o'clock sharp. Even on weekends, Mary never allowed herself to stay up late. And today it was Monday, and there were 2 meetings at the ministry, which she had to attend. She dragged her feet reluctantly down onto the fluffy carpet in the bedroom and looked enviously at the sweetly sleeping man, whose swarthy torso of relief stood out spectacularly among the silk sheets. A fool for a fool, it seemed, but a sweet one. She thought, remembering the madness of the previous night. I wouldn't change it just yet. Let him play for another week. As she stood under the hot shower, she mentally scrolled through all the business of the day ahead and knew how much depended on her today. She was about to become a bank manager. It was not for nothing that she was so diligent in buying stock. And she had to have a serious talk with the Finns. It's a worthwhile business. Then she began to think it was time to buy a new car. The old one would soon be 2 years old, and that it would be nice to go back to Paris for Christmas, and that my mother had become lazy. She doesn't even want to dig the garden. She wants them to hire a gardener. However, her mother was the only person in Mary's life who was forgiven for all the little and bait eccentricities. One look at her, and a particularly polite, cold smile immediately sent shivers down her spine. Boyd Broad. It was said of her alone. The Iron Lady. Others echoed. She knew it, but she was not offended. She liked to play with other people's fates, to lift them up unexpectedly and throw them down into the abyss unexpectedly, to beckon with promises and destroy in public. She had as much good as a scorpion, more venom than a rattlesnake. She was feared. She was flattered, oddly enough, respected for her professionalism. At least nothing in this world had ever come in vain to her. "Your breakfast is ready," the housekeeper said respectfully. When Mary came into the dining room fresh from the shower, the driver would be at 8:30. As you requested. For some reason, she was in a good mood this morning, and the croissants seemed tastier and the coffee more aromatic. And the driver, who was waiting for her in the car, even smiled at her. Maybe it was because the receptionist greeted her in the reception area, handing her a sheet of paper with the schedule for the day. "Mary, we have a new security guard. See for yourself, or the head of human resources will take care of it." Myself, Mary nodded. Have her come into the office. She didn't immediately realize who was in front of her. But when she looked closely, she realized with amazement that it was David, with the same blue eyes. The remnants of blonde hair neatly enrolled on the side. A pressed cheap suit, an unforgiving expression on the face of a man who was used to respect authority. "Sit down," she graciously told him, taking a drag on a thin cigarette. He dutifully crouched on the edge of the leather table. And then a shadow of recognition ran across his face. Mary, but how? Like this. A reunion of old friends on the Elbe. She laughed wickedly. "Only I'm not your Mary now. How are you, David?" "Oh, don't worry. You just relax." "I'm not touching. I'm all right," David mumbled. "Served in the army, then stayed on as an enlisted man. Now I'm a security guard." "So they kicked you out of college, huh?" Mary asked in a satisfied voice. "I was expelled because of your signature. I was told that if you signed it, they would let you stay. I did sign," she mocked frankly. "Didn't you like the committee's signature?" He had something else to say. But Mary had had enough of this pointless conversation. After all, she had so much to do today. Still, when the door closed behind him, she couldn't stand it and took out a bottle of cognac. "Well, David, you're mine now. Now we're even," she said to herself.